We've gone from asking LLMs to think things through for us to the LLM now saying, did you think of this?
Today on the Business Video Playbook, Kevin Alster, strategic advisor at Synthesia, shares how AI-driven video helps L&D teams transform how people learn, engage, and develop new skills.
Kevin Alster from Synthesia, thank you for joining us today all the way from Copenhagen. Welcome to the Business Video Playbook.
Thank you so much for having me on here. I really appreciate the time.
You've worked in education, you've done digital learning, and so now you're in AI video. And can you talk a little bit about your path and what led you to your current role and what you do for Synthesia?
When we're thinking about particularly how somebody learns something, I ask, what's the story here? Who's the character in the story? What is the challenge that they're trying to overcome? How do they attempt to solve that problem? And then what worked and what was the result of that? And when I used to teach kindergarten, you don't just tell kids off the bat, if you work hard, your dreams will come true. What you do instead is you find different ways to take bits of information and you give it to them in different formats. And you might tell stories, for example, about a character who persevered through to the end. If we're talking about corporate training, it's about how do you move from this idea of just click to continue courses and really thinking about, okay, how do we convince somebody not to fall for a phishing scam? It's going to be the person who clicked on that email and lost the company $1 million. That's a story that really provides context and sticks. I've also worked in VR storytelling as well as other formats as well. So I'm always looking for what is the best way to learn with the tech. What piece of tech can I grab that's going to help tell that story the best?
When you first started working with AI for video, what were some of the interesting ways that it works that surprised you in terms of helping to tell stories?
I used to be a senior producer at the school of the New York Times, helping to produce, everything from the shoot to editing. So I have the full workflow in mind. And what stuck with me was it used to take anywhere from 25 to 50K for an average day of shooting. That's all the hair and makeup and everything else. What surprised me the most about AI video was that you can get to prototype, you can get to first draft more quickly, and then you'd publish it out. But then if I got edits, I didn't have to go back to the beginning of this linear process of shooting, editing, and then publishing. I just had to click edit. And that was the kind of the first aha moment that I had.
It sounds like the strategy is to really come up with content and the format and the structure of it that meets learners where they are. And so, I might want to take class 1 through 5 in sequential order and not stray. Others might want to take a section of the class and then go read a PDF or an article or take a quiz. As an educator, is that kind of aligned with how people today realistically learn and consume content?
Typically, when I talk with L&D teams, we have a very antiquated view of how information gets into the brain based off of this classroom model where there is an expert at the front who is facing you and you are a student at the desk. We've taken that classroom model, we've transformed that for online. And that's what a lot of e-learning is. It's you're going to take this course, you're going to read this information or take this in, and it doesn't match what people are trying to do. It doesn't match the context where they're at. When I'm trying to communicate information, I think, where's this person right now? Are they in their car on the way to work? Are they sitting at a computer? Are they in front of a machine? What is the outcome you want to drive? What is the information the person needs to get there in the context? And what is the modality that's going to deliver on that? Particularly with LLMs, it's completely changed the way that people interact with information. If I'm an employee in a company and I want to learn how to make pivot tables in Excel because I've got all this data and I want an easier way to go through with it. Well, if we were in around 2014 where you have LMSs and you start to see a lot of self-authored content on YouTube, what would I do first? I'd search on my company's LMS. How do I make pivot tables in Excel? I see that there's an hour and 45-minute course. And I think, you know what? I just want to get started. Where do I go? I go outside of the company. I go to YouTube because there is a video that will crystallize the basics of that information in about 5 minutes. And it's probably going to be more engaging. Now, if we look at large language models and what they've done is now I can ask anything. I can use the LLM to help me come up with answers to the problems that I'm working on. But then we also see this thing of scaffolding where an LLM, it doesn't think, but it can determine based off of what you're responding that you might or might not understand what you're asking. So if that's the case, let me just pitch this in this different way to you. So we start to see that information is taking different sizes depending on what your input is. And this really gets at that vision of interactivity, where
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about pushing out information. It's about how do we build learning or enablement content to meet this format of, hey, what is this person going to need at the moment that they're trying to solve something? And how could I pitch them the information how can I pitch it to them in a format that they'll need? So we've gone from asking LLMs to think things through for us to the LLM now saying, "Did you think of this?" And so it's I think we have to design our own communication for that shifting of
Mm-hmm.
who's asking who to do what.
So the next question is, what are some of the challenges that learning and development teams face today?
Particularly learning and development is stuck in this publishing model. And producing content doesn't happen at the speed of the business. An analogy might be you go to a coffee shop, they take your order, they say, you know what? Come back in 3 weeks, we'll have your order. And so you leave and you come back. And when you get to the coffee shop, there are 300, 400 people there, and everybody's just getting a pumpkin spice latte. It's a one size fits all solution for all the people who are there. And that's the reality of the situation that folks are stuck in right now, where they're publishing content. Again, they're taking requests and they're making something for someone else, and they're just hoping that they get it. So there's two parts here. One part is this idea of inertia in the organization. This is just how we're used to using learning and the learning and development or the training team. We put in a request, we get something out. The other part of the problem that they're stuck with is when you're publishing content and hoping somebody gets it is there's no way for you to understand how your viewer is interacting with the content. So if you're going through onboarding or security training, people are trying to watch it at 2 or 3 times speed. If you're taking a compliance training course, it's click to continue. And what that just reminded me of is I used to take my mouse and I would put two fingers right next to each other and just drum on the button just so I could get to the end. And so we don't know if the viewer has understood the content. There's no way the viewer can talk to or interact with the information, which we talked about earlier is the big shift with learning with large language models and other platforms that people use. And then, of course, there's no way to match the information to the person who's taking it because it is so expensive or it does take time to publish these things. And so that's the biggest challenge that we're seeing with those who are creating any sort of enablement or training content is they're stuck in this publishing model where the expectation is this is the workflow and how it works. And then on the other end, lack of knowledge or awareness of, is this actually working? Is this effective? Is this driving performance?
So as far as evaluating learning and development, you can look at
Yeah.
time spent watching the courses, course completion. You could offer quizzes. But this then takes it to a new level. And I'm just curious if this post-training experimentation A/B testing is common practice, or is this kind of a best practice moving forward?
The big shift that is happening, whether that's in the learning and development space or just looking at how we train and enable people, it's having a performance mindset, figuring out what is the information that somebody needs in order to make that jump. What is the prior experience that they have to activate? How can we get them to practice that? Because if you don't use it, you lose it, or you don't put that information in action, and then designing the experience of it. A lot of the teams that I work with, we talked about the inertia of the organization and how they see the training and development folks and how they create content. They're just asked to create content, and that's just what it is. It's creating content. And so no wonder they're looking at measurement. Did people actually watch the content? But that's actually quite short-sighted. The point is changing someone's behavior. You might learn something as a result of that. Learning is the product. But in the end, what are we looking for is a change in behavior. You want to look at later on down the road and say, what are the actions that people were taking? Was it different as a result of seeing this bit of content? You can still test people's knowledge and give them practice and feedback when they're in this course taking experience, for example, one way that you might do that is by using avatars to create a scenario where I have Jim the hacker and I have Suzanne the employee. What is the mindset and what is the approach that Jim is taking in order to fool Suzanne? What is Suzanne going to do in response? And
Fishing
if you
101
represent
is how to
Suzanne in
avoid
this case, you can give
procrastination.
somebody 3 choices. You could create a
1.
branching scenario where
Recognize
somebody
phishing
gets to
by using
actually
odd
practice
emails,
and say,
urgent tones,
these
typos,
choices
unclear
aren't always
files, and
black
odd
and white.
URLs.
And I can try something out and see what happens. And then on the back end, when we look at analytics, we can say, okay, what percentage of employees, when they encountered the Jack and Suzanne scenario, how many of them made the incorrect choice and got phished in this very safe, closed, contained, hypothetical environment?
Mm-hmm.
That tells me, as the ones who have a performance mindset, hey, there is a training that needs to happen. And now I see where that branch broke down and the choices people are making. How do I design content that targets that?
Okay, so we're talking quite a bit about learning development, corporate training. And so let's imagine I'm a learning development director, head of learning development for an SMB, maybe an enterprise, small enterprise. And I'm well aware of AI and of the capabilities and the potential. But I'm also very busy in my day to day. I'm familiar with how to create courses my way. This is a whole new way with a learning curve. What are ways that someone like me, a learning and development person, could get into using AI to start dabbling and start to really appreciate the possibilities?
There are 2 ways to approach this. One is a lot of the folks that we talk to, if they don't see the immediate value of using AI video to replace their old workflows, it's important for them to think about, okay, what can I use video for?
Mhm.
And the framework that comes to mind is the 3 E's: engagement, for experiences, and enablement. Just start with AI video by creating a teaser. Just really nail that what's in it for me statement. Talk about what the learner can expect in a course, almost as if you were selling a product and just giving the pitch right off the bat. So engagement is the first place that you can start. And these types of course communications where they're really short bite-sized videos that you might just need someone to say, hey, this is just going to be a more engaging way to deliver this information. I can show you the outline and other things as well, but this is just the beginning. With experiences, this is where we say, okay, what is video good for? It's great for providing context. It's great for providing stories. And so therefore, how can I use this to bring a story or a scenario to life? How can I model a difficult conversation between 2 avatars that represent an employee who's asking for a raise and a manager who's saying, you know, this is not the best time in the quarter. How can I show that conversation rather than just having somebody read that? And then the third E is enablement. And this is where it's about showing somebody how something is done. And so an example there is if you have any sort of help center or knowledge-based content or product knowledge where rather than looking at a series of screenshots and reading through, it's much easier for me to have a video that's in a window on the side, the person to have the app on the other side, and I can walk them through in, let's say, a screen recording on what to do next. So if you do not know where to start, that's one easy way to say, where can I engage people at the beginning of an experience through engagement and short
Mhm.
videos? Where can I build experiences, so scenarios or stories? And then the third is enablement. Sometimes people just need to know how to plug the plug into the socket. And I'm going to show them all the steps from point A to point B. The second type of person, I think, is going to be a bit more of an advanced user. They have an eye on performance, and they really want to think about this idea of purposeful practice, where we don't just want people consuming information, we want them making choices. We want them to interact. And so if you're a career learning and development person or a career performance support person, you know that information needs to be put into action so that someone can see the result of that action in order for them to change their behavior. And so you can use AI video for knowledge checks and quizzes. You can use it for branching scenarios. And this is coming down the way in just a few months. But if creating
Hello
videos
and
is not
welcome
your
to this
jam,
short
then
tutorial on
agentic
handling
AI
insomnia in a
avatars
healthcare
and
setting.
video is going
In this
to
session, we'll walk through a
change how
real-world patient
we
scenario.
deliver information, how we practice, how we coach. That's coming down the way as well.
Okay, so let's talk about customer education. In many cases, it's viewed as a cost to organizations. But with AI, you frame it as a potential growth driver. And so, can you talk about how AI shifts that equation from a cost to an actual growth driver?
Customer education becomes a growth driver if you're able to connect the customer education into the data pipeline. And part of that is having a full-on robust learning management system that can integrate with Salesforce and
Mhm.
um, other types of CRMs that you might use to say what is the customer life cycle. And so once you're able to make that switch where you plug in your customer education and your LMS into the rest of the customer life cycle, it's not going to give you a definitive answer. Are people spending more money because they interacted with our content? It's not going to be as definitive as that, but at least you can prove that you were a touch point along the way to lower the barrier to activation, or you're able to lower the time to value because you're helping onboard people in a more tactical way. Where this changes with AI video and what we've seen a lot with not just at Synthesia, but also with our customers as well, is access to video. So what we talked about before, the cost and effort to create that video. With AI video, translation and localization, that's table
Welcome to this
stakes.
introductory video to our training series. Bonjour et bienvenue
We
dans
often
cette
talk
vidéo
about speed to
d'introduction à notre
content,
série de formations.
but a lot of SaaS companies play globally and they need their content translated into multiple languages. And then not only is it the speed of content creation and the localization, but then there's also, if you have something like a SaaS product, you need to keep your content up to date for it to be useful. And so if it lives on your LMS and it's embedded there, you're constantly making changes. You're in communication with product and saying, okay, what's coming down in a month? How do I change my customer education content to match that change? And then there's a new product release. The email goes out, the in-product app lets the customer know this has changed, and then immediately you have the educational content to help take off the weight of, hey, there's new information. As a customer, I'm thinking, you didn't tell me about this, but we can say, oh, here's the content, or here's the update, and here's the content, and here's how we can make sure that um, you're continuing to be happy as a customer. And I think also keeping in mind that customer education is actually a very small part of an organization. With our knowledge and enablement team, there are 4 people in a company of 500 that are working on customer education. And so that gives you a sense of how many people there are to support the operations, the customer management, the stakeholder management, everything that goes into the Academy platform. So having an AI tool that helps you do more with a lot less and kind of meet those needs of scale, speed to creation, localization, keeping content up to date, it matters a lot for these small teams.
It is interesting because to me, customer communication, customer education, it's an essential part of the customer journey. And it's one of many touch points, but it's an important touch point. And I think of even at Sprout Video, we have a pretty robust help article library, and it includes videos. And we track very closely what different channels led to a customer, someone becoming a customer or signing up for a free trial. And these help articles, again and again, are big drivers for conversions for us at the top of the funnel. And then maybe it's at the end of the funnel, someone's deciding
Yes.
between us and someone else. It's like, oh, we had this really helpful help article, showed them how to do it, easy peasy. Boom, I'm going with these people. So it builds loyalty with existing customers. It gives them access to how to use your software services. It attracts top of funnel folks through even search engine optimization.
Yes.
So to me, it's like fundamental.
Yeah, and just building off of that, Tim, something that also brings to mind is a lot of the customers that we work with, if they have this type of help center content, the quality of the article itself, I think, does not do the brand justice, meaning, especially if it's an SEO optimized blog post,
Mhm.
it's just a couple of keywords that have been chat GPT'd into an article. That's an opportunity to educate your customer and build
Mhm.
trust and build loyalty and say, I'm not just buying a vendor, I'm also buying a partner. And what we've seen also by adding videos, of course, that have a bit of polish, maybe the template is created by the design team. When somebody comes from a Google search, the information itself has to be quality to build that loyalty and trust that you're talking about. But having a
Mhm.
video, especially if you're a SaaS product, it's going to help your brand to establish trust and say, look at the quality that we put into even the small stuff.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions that people might have about AI generated video content, whether they're learning development folks, marketers, content creators?
The biggest misconception that I see is that speed and speed to creation is what's going to move the needle for the type of outcomes that you're trying to drive. When you think about the channels where people put this content, it's more people just creating more and more content into the existing channels that we have. So it's really a losing game for everyone because it gets harder to find the information that you need. And so the biggest misconception is that with all this video that we're creating, it should be about publishing more content when really it's about taking a step back and saying, with AI video, what does it allow us to, what is the real new frontier? What is the new opportunity? It's making video interactive. It's creating friction points where we can stop the scroll, not by having the loudest voice or the most frightening thing to kind of jerk somebody out of scrolling, but really let me deliver you quality, engaging content. Let me allow you to make decisions and interact. Maybe let me delight you with a curiosity that you have, and then you can follow that curiosity down through branching. And so it's this misconception that we just need more content or more video, and AI video allows us to create that more quickly. And so I think that AI slop will continue to be a problem decades from now. Interactivity, that is the new frontier. You can create branching, you can tell a story, you can give your viewer agency and choice, or the fact that you can use video to link between different resources within the video itself and keep your customer or your prospect in the flow of your information as you lead them further down the funnel or as you lead them to a particular outcome. There's also the ability to create more interactive types of experiences. And so by that, I mean, let's say you want to add some gamified elements onto your website. You could prompt a spinning wheel where I could say, I have these types of products and I have these types of choices. When the person clicks the wheel, I want them to reveal a prize that they have. It's a small thing, but video just becomes kind of one step on the journey rather than the end point itself. And so there's a lot of potential. We've given people the tools and the opportunity to create something, but we're still getting all the dirty tap water out, all of the AI slop, and we'll come out on the other end and figure out, okay, I actually have an understanding of what format is needed for the message I'm trying to drive. So there's a lot of potential there.
My small team, marketing team, we're experimenting with different AI tools. And the hypothesis is that we can do quite a bit more with the same size team. And what we've come to realize is that there isn't a single tool that does it all. It's a combination of maybe a couple of different tools. But what doesn't seem to change is the need for a very thoughtful human involved in the strategy, in telling this, in building the story. And even with design, we'll have our designer come in and touch up some things that might have been AI generated. So I think that long term, a focus on storytelling, thinking about the learning outcomes, thinking about your audience and how to engage them, but provide some kind of value is always going to win. So
we should always be experimenting. So I think it sounds like you're doing the right work. But what you said, it's about how do we strategically think about this? What are we actually trying to drive? And making sure that the answer isn't just to produce more, but where is our audience and how will they get to this content? I think that's a huge question that a lot of people miss because they're new to video creation or they haven't been on YouTube or other social platforms in this way before.
Can you share an example of how someone might use AI avatars, video in the context of like internal private corporate communications?
When the COVID pandemic was really in full swing, you had a lot of businesses shutting down. There's this Japanese company called Henge. They had just been publicly listed, and so they were talking to their investors, but they obviously couldn't be in the same room. And what they did is they had avatars of the senior leaders,
the CEO of Henge,
and they had the quarterly results. They did it in Japanese, but that content could also be translated for other investors who are in other languages as well. And that to me is the perfect example of the best format for when you're trying to deliver any sort of information that maybe requires a leader's face, but not the emotional connection that you would need in order to drive a message home. It's good for the type of communication that is going to come up not just once to announce something else, but maybe it's a monthly update or a quarterly update or a weekly update. This is really where we start to think of if you're in an internal comms or if you're in HR and you're thinking about how do I use AI video, it helps to think of kind of what is the announcement that needs to go out, or what are you trying to communicate? Is there emotion or a human connection that moment calls for? Like, is it going to be an IT service change or is it going to be a mass layoff? You can pretty much guess when you'd use AI video versus not. Do I need it to be translated into different languages because I'm a global company? How fluid is the message? Meaning, how likely is this information to be updated? Need to be updated quickly? That's what's good for an AI video or an AI avatar.
How about we close with looking ahead? I'm wondering if you could share kind of your take on where things are headed next. Have you given some thought to how things are going to continue to evolve?
There's the next 6 months, and then there's the next 6 years where we're thinking about how AI video is going to evolve. And so if we look in the short term, if we look in the next 6 months, what's really going to change the format of video is agentic video. Looking at video not as something to consume, but again, opening up this two-way channel of communication. Maybe it's trying to assess how well you understand your company's training by asking you a series of questions. And what the avatar and the video represents is just the changing of the mode of how we're interacting. In the next 6 years, we'll start to see that the video itself is also going to become even more dynamic than it is now. What we're able to see with analytics now is we're able to see a video went out to 100 people. I can see based off of the number of views, kind of what are the hotspots and where do people drop off. But what if you also have under your heat map, you also see a little button that just says suggested changes. We noticed that there was this much drop off here. We think that you could edit the script in that way. And so maybe your first step is to look at that and say, oh, I'm going to make that script a little bit tighter. I can do that with an LLM, just shorten the script. Great. Oh, this image wasn't that engaging. Perhaps you might be able to use this video asset instead. And then maybe the next step after that is you might just say, you know what? You've been pretty good about these suggested edits. Just go ahead and make them. And eventually where we get to in the next 6 years is that video is this completely dynamically changing format where you have the intent or the outcome of the story, but based on how it performs with 100 different viewers, it says, these are the edits I would make. It shows it to the next 100 viewers. And as the video changes over time, it's going to be able to give you the best version of your intent or your story or your outcome that you're trying to drive. Video really truly becomes this dynamic format.
It's exciting for people that produce content, and the number one objective usually is to keep people engaged and continue watching. And so any tools that we can use, whether it's AI or any analytics that help us evaluate how to improve that video content, is extremely exciting. So thanks for sharing that. And I love the vision. Kevin Alster from Synthesia, thank you so much for joining us today on the Business Video Playbook.
Thank you so much, Tim. It was a pleasure to be here.
And cut.